Hello, everybody. My name is Campbell Stevens. I'm here today to demonstrate what we can do with Canadian football webinars, and most especially what we can do on the Crowdcast platform. Today, what I wanted to do was just spend a very brief bit of time demonstrating the type of thing that we will be doing, which is to do Canadian content for Canadian players and Canadian coaches and have that as an online resource. So we are looking for sponsors to come and join us in providing Canadian content. And the way that we want to do that and the method that we want to do that is to use education. We want to be able to educate our participants on your products. And if we can accomplish that, if we can use some of the fundamentals that are built into education, such as retention rate, and that we structure that presentation around retention rate, I think we will accomplish what you want and we'll accomplish what we want. And that means then that everyone wins. So when you sponsor content such as, let's say it's footwork for cornerbacks, what you're going to do is halfway through that webinar, I will run an educational session on a product of your choice as a sponsor. So in essence, what we're going to do is we're going to provide educational opportunity in terms of what football techniques are, and then we're going to provide another educational opportunity according to what we're being sponsored on. And I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of that here today. So what I want to do is just talk a bit about myself very quickly. I began coaching in the 80s. I left and went into business, but after I was a sales manager, I became a trainer, a corporate trainer, and an instructor in college, and I specialized in online course design. I've been in community in high school since 2006. I spent also 3 years in Europe, which was all American rules, and it was a very interesting observation that the Europeans are really gaining ground on us, and they're in a lot of ways accelerating past us, especially in the way that they're disseminating technical information about their game. And that's why we at Canadian Football Webinars want to take care of that. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to take one small piece of technique, which is offensive line and defensive line, and we're going to take the American form, we're going to take the Canadian form, we're going to look at how the game and the differences in the game change those techniques. Now, I have in here that we're going to do cornerback techniques, but it's simply too long to get done, and what I want is a demonstration session. So if you're watching this and you think that that's a great idea, that really what we should be doing is analyzing the different cornerback techniques, which are, by the way, really hugely different, just drop me an email. Go on to my website at CanadianFootballWebinars.com. Send me an email, and I'll set it up. But I'll tell you what, I'll be able to get an expert to do that, someone that specializes at least at the CIS level in just dealing in cornerback techniques, so that we can really have a great discussion with that. Okay. First of all, the Canadian game is 3 downs. American is 4 downs. But that isn't the only reason why the games are so different. The field size is hugely different. And you can see from this picture that A, it's very wide, and B, it's a lot longer in the Canadian game. So when you look at the Canadian game, it's or the field rather, it's 110 yards long. It's 2 20-yard end zones. And let me tell you, when I walked at my first American field for the first game, I was like, wow, is this ever small? I was really beginning to wonder if my Canadian passing techniques were even going to work on a field that size. And you know what? In some cases, it just didn't, because really, for a lot of factors, but one of them being that it's such a smaller field. It's, when you get into the triple combos that we do here, it just didn't seem like there was enough field space to make it work, But you can see here that what you've got is very interesting lineup. Like if you take these fronts, you got a 3 here. Now look at your line. This is obviously 3 linebackers here, but you're starting to see that these linebackers and DBs are all pretty much at the same depth, which is kind of unique. You're going to see in one of the films that we're going to do today, just some of the quick video that we're going to look at. There are NCAA teams that do the same thing. But what this obviously does is set up a confusion for the quarterback in his pre-snap. But you can see here, let me just mention this, even though we all may know it, is that anybody behind this line can move directly toward the line in motion, which you cannot do in the United States. And these two can move down the line. As long as they don't leave the line, they can move down the line. And that you cannot do in the United States as well. And what happens then is that we end up in all kinds of different motion packages here in Canada that are really exciting to watch. And what that means is the defense is really has to make quick calls, because in essence, they can shift this entire package to this side. And these guys are going to have to know to make the calls to make sure that they know who's going to travel and who's got who and who's got what zone if they're in zone. So very, very different. What it does is it really puts a lot of pressure on the defense to be very skilled. And for the coaches too, when we coach defense, you have to really make sure everybody knows what the responsibilities are against any possible package. So really, really different game. And in the American game, we're going to see as we go forward, there is only one player allowed to motion. He's not allowed to motion toward the line, and there's only one of them can move at one time. So if this is an American player and he moves over here, he must stop, and then a tight end can move back this way. Okay, but they can't be moving at the same time. Makes it much easier to adjust on your defense, but their game has different challenges for personnel, just like ours is completely different. So some of the rule changes really create, to be honest with you, they create very different schemes, and especially the size of the field. But having 3 downs as opposed to 4 changes the tactics in the game. And just let me explain what I mean by the tactics. When I was reading a military book, I finally got my first really clear definition of the word strategy, and that was all the preparation and effort that you make up until the game starts. Or in a military terms, they would say it's all the preparation, planning, and intelligence that you do up until contact with the enemy. So the way that I view strategy is all the preparation, practicing, film work, game planning that we do up until game time. During the game, it's tactics. Once that game's on, now you're dealing in tactics. And the tactics can be techniques, they can be what you're trying to accomplish, adjustments that you make as coaches. But here's some of the ideas. Like in Canada, it's pass a lot. Everybody focuses pretty heavily on pass. A lot more of the run game is coming back, but in a way that it's combined with pass plays to create delays in defensive thinking, which is if they need any more, right? In the American game, it right now is pass as well. Although there's a heavy emphasis on pass, I think there's beginning to realize that simply aren't enough quarterbacks to make it happen. And my prediction this year for American ball is watch how the run game comes back with a huge impact this NFL season. Why? It's much easier to find running backs in O-line than it is to find quarterbacks that can throw that much. A lot of kicking in the Canadian game, but the kicking game doesn't have to be the way it always is shown. It can be a very exciting part of the game. You can turn it into a real weapon if you're willing to be that risk taker as a coach. So just some of the things that are different, but the main thing I found that was different was that an American game is very much about one-on-ones and whether or not someone can beat another one-on-one. I found in the Canadian game, there was enough ability to change technique and change how a player moves that one-on-one wasn't all that important. And you managed, even with the extra player, you could sometimes get a 2-on-1. And it becomes a bit easier to do 2-on-1s in certain situations. But also I found that, that American game is set up so that the one-on-one is one guy has to beat the other guy. And a lot of sense maybe in Canada it is that way too. But I really find that with the wider field and with the different requirements with the 1 yard off the ball, it's not as prevalent as it is in the U.S. In fact, we really had smaller, faster O-line long before the zone blocking scheme came in the U.S. We'd in a lot of cases in the CFL, we've been ahead on a lot of technique and development. So what we're going to do is just take a quick look at some of these. We'll go American first. Hopefully this works the way I want it to. Now, sorry. Just let me get to the top defensive ends here. This is the American ones. Now, this first guy that we're going to take a look at purely for technique reasons. And you know what? I'm not analyzing film here, so we're not going back and forth. All I want to do is just take a few seconds to look at some similarities and some differences, especially when it concerns up front here. Okay. So let's roll it. Have a look. I think if we're focusing on 43 here. Now he's going to stand up 2-point position, makes a nice read, really, really nice read, protects his outside contain. That all would pretty much be the same, except for the angle that he takes. With the wider field, we like to encourage them to get even further out with a wider step and a bigger angle. Wow. You can see where the running back just completely turtled on that one. Now here's a stunt. So 93s come from the outside to the in. He gets beautifully picked up and stuffed, really, but the quarterback makes a bad choice, I think. Okay, now this is a great play. Watch this guy right here. He just stuffs that outside block and plays it so tough to the weak side of the boundary. Really nice job. He is here. Really quite good footwork, and he keeps his hands. Watch this. He just brushes past with a swim technique. Now you can see his feet are kind of out of line, so he can't make the push that he wants to. And boom, trouble. Okay, now, see, this is the difference really in offenses, right? If you have a read option here, he can't slow play this like this, right? He's got to make a commitment one way or the other. Right now, what he does is he just takes this block on, right? Plays it beautifully technique-wise, okay? And look here, like on this inside in here, the hand play that we want to be looking at, this is, to me, by this offensive guard, is not great hand play, okay? Even though they're making contact here, he's going to get pushed back. He's got to get extension. He's got to get his hands into the chest. What we want to be seeing on O-line is setting your feet or moving your feet in the right direction and getting your hands into his chest so that he is forced out onto your shoulders, if at worst. But when you control the chest, you control the center of gravity. And that doesn't change between either sport, but it's just different how it happens, in my opinion, really because of the yard difference. And even though they say there's not a yard difference, the contact comes quicker in the American game than it does in the Canadian. And we're going to take a look at it. Nice, nice. He just stuffs that block, plays his outside contain. In this case, this is a great play here, because what they did on the scheme call was to give him an inside pursuit. And this guy's job was to hold the contain. Now, if the running back could see it the way we do, which would be nice and easy for the poor guy, if you watch this play, he really takes too far an inside. Right? See? Now, maybe it's because he's moving that way, but this guy should always be on this outside shoulder. Because if this does come this way and he breaks that contain, the only one in here is him, and these two are coming for him. Okay? But he gets a beautiful outside jab, step, boom, right inside, which I really love that from the strong side. Really nice job. Okay. Now, let's just go over to the Canadian one for a second. Right away, you're going to notice the field difference. And this is one of the things that I talk to a lot of times, to a lot of people, is we really need to start doing what, and you know what, the CFL, you got to hand it to them. They are doing different sets and trying to take advantage of this width, okay? Again, we've got a very similar set here. We have about a 5-yard depth. We got a bit of press up here on this wide receiver. This guy will probably backpedal to 5, but let's take a look at our DN techniques, because I want you to watch this one. Now, I really should mention this guy is playing more or less American techniques in the Canadian game. And you can see that distance is pretty damn big now. So we're going to get, this is coach's film, so we get the overall. So sometimes can be a little hard to see, but this is great angle here. Now, what I want you to watch is our left tackle here. He gets his head down and he lunges, and oh boy, does he ever pay for it. Man, oh man. If you ever want to see a 340-pound guy fit under a chair, just go to his film session after this one. Here we go. Boom. See how his head got down? Pulled down or not. Okay, so they're rolling away, so it really didn't have an impact. But that's not good technique, gentlemen. You never want to be lunging. Again, he's getting his outside shoulder. And what you're going to notice here is that it starts to have him. Now, it's going to start, you'll start to see, it's going to have him overstriding to the outside. He's trying to prevent him from getting his outside shoulder. Okay, that's not good either. And you'll see why in a minute, because obviously it sets up the inside, but our DNs don't take the inside route as much as we saw perhaps in that other video. And really I would need to have some of our top DCs. But for me, I think it's really important to have our DNs sometimes change contain with a linebacker and come inside, because you can really create great pressures with that. So all it takes is a linebacker committed to the outside for contain. So let's take a look here. We got two stand-up ends. Got a linebacker playing up in here, which looks like it should be some kind of a three-man set. But this is far. You see how they're trying to stretch this O-line out, okay? They're very wide, and they're going to attack fast. Wow, he's got quick hands too. Let's just take another quick look at that, because he sets it up with his feet, and then watch how he uses his hands to prevent his hands from getting on him. Boom, look at that. Whew. Man, he's a handful. Boy, that poor left tackle is going to take it and film. Now let's have a look here. He's dropping into zone. It's well done. The O-line did a good job on that. Let's just take a look and see what we've got. Okay, let's roll it. Okay, so they slid. He really needs to be up on this outside shoulder if he can get out there. This would be a perfect time to take an inside route if he could. Okay, good job. You saw how they filled every gap pretty much, forced the throw. But you can see the different challenges between the American game and the Canadian game. Now, what I like ends to do is to widen here to get the edge. Wow, that's a hold. Boy, is that our left tackle again? Ouch. I hate to criticize. I certainly never played in the CFL, but my goodness. Let's see if we can see it. Let's watch the footwork here. Now he's down, 3-point stance. He's up. Inside foot up, outside foot up. And that makes a huge difference. It's one thing you got to really make sure how it is that you want to do your first step. Because I know in a lot of the American stuff, we used to step by the second step, try to split this guy right in the middle so that you could go either way. Let's just see what happens here. 1, 2. Okay. He split him on the second step. First step he used. But it kind of looks to me like a bit like that first step's a waste, doesn't it? Like I think what we're seeing here is American technique in Canada. He's got his hand down. He tries, well, that is old. I mean, he does get the edge again, but he really uses his body to try to convince him he's going inside. But let's watch the footwork again here now. Okay, so he's got outside foot up. Now, if he can, well, left hand down. See, I think really what we have to do is start looking at ways to utilize our game changes to our advantage. I mean, to be honest with you, that really looks like a challenge for our left tackle there. Wow, I shouldn't really be laughing. Oh boy, oh boy. It's not pretty in the film room when that kind of game is going on. You sure know what's coming as a player, that's for sure. Okay. Now, I'm obviously keeping this really short, and I'm trying to keep it as fine as I can. And I mean, maybe there isn't that much different on the lines, but there is with hands and feet. And if there's two things that I think are most important, it's hands and feet. In fact, in every football position, in my opinion, it goes to hands, hips, feet. And you can trace that, start right at the bottom with the base. The feet, you go to the hips, especially in extension for strength. But if you don't have hand placement, it's all over for you. If the O-line gets inside your chest, it's over for you. They're not going to give it up, and you're not going to get away. On D-line too, you must fight their hands. Never let their hands get to your chest. That's why a lot of the swim moves that I see expose the chest. It's hard to do a swim move without exposing your chest. And if it's a good O-lineman, he'll punch right into that center. And believe me, it can take just 2 fingers in the center of your chest to stop your forward momentum. It just doesn't take a lot of strength. If they can get that placement and do the technique, you're pretty much over. So just some quick things, some summaries here. One of the things that is a huge difference, and I could probably spend most of the time on scheme in terms of what the differences are between the Canadian and American. And if you'd be interested in that, you're watching this right now and you're saying, that's a great idea, just go to my website, drop me an email, let me know you think it's a great idea, and we'll put one of these up and we'll just focus on scheme. It doesn't always have to be techniques, although I think really the big technique differences are in the DBs, especially at corner between the Canadian and American game. But here on the zone block, which both leagues run, in the American, they take a bucket or a lateral step, which means they step back, even though that they supposedly have a yard, and it does look like a yard, but you've got to get by the center. So when you're taking your first step in the U.S. game, you take a bucket step so that you get a better angle, and you actually get a lot more movement in doing it. You create separation. In Canada, on the zone block, first step's 45-degree angle. We try to take that full yard back by stepping 45 degrees. And so we don't get as much lateral movement on that, but we do really get the yard right off the bat. In the American game, for me, I always what I worked on with O-line on the inside always was really getting their hands up quickly, because if you don't, the D-line just eats you alive. A lot of times, and I got to admit, and I've talked to a few guys about this, the DN techniques are often very similar in the Canadian and American. And I guess what I'm saying is that I really think that we should be starting to develop techniques that take advantage of the rules of our game, the width of the field, the 1 yard off the ball in the 12-man. We need to really start to create things that are different. Instead of bringing American game here, we should start to create our own techniques and our own advantages, which we do. At the CFL and CIS level, they do that. What we want to do on the football webinars, or the Canadian football webinars, is get those ideas out to everybody so that they can use them. Like right now, if I go on YouTube, what we're going to see there is American football content. And that's why I go to the community games now, and what I'm seeing when there's 4-down football on a Canadian field is Canadian football being played between the hash marks, because a lot of what we're getting is American techniques and American ideas, which is fine, but you've got to adapt them to the differences of our game. So here's where I really want to cover the sponsors corner. And this is where halfway through our webinar, we would stop, and this is not a commercial. What I view this as is an educational session on a piece of equipment. And what I chose here was the Vices crushable helmet. And if you're watching this right now, you're seeing that there's a button on the Crowdcast platform right in front of you that says crushable helmet, where I would be telling everybody to click that button so that we can go directly to their website. Now, what I'm going to do is go directly here and show you what I mean, because in essence, what we want to do with our sponsors is have something that I call education marketing. And what we're going to do is use the fundamentals of education to get across not so much a message, but to engage people, engage them with the product in an educational atmosphere. So what I've done here is taken Vices, which is a new helmet technology. These guys took a company and essentially said, we're not going to be a football helmet maker. We're going to be a technology company that's going to look at the concussion and head injury problem, and we're going to build a helmet to try to reduce the amount of head injuries that football has by improving the helmet. And how they compared it, which I thought was very interesting, was that in car crash technology, when they looked at that, there was from 1970 to 1990, there were virtually no changes in the dash. It was all very hard inside, so people's heads were smashing against hard substances. Now there's airbags. There's been all kinds of developments to make it safer, and they're saying, why can't we do the same with a helmet? So what I'm going to show you here is one part of the video that shows the construction of the helmet and how they came up with it. And what they did was that they have what they they have kind of a different plastic, I think, on the outside, but in the inside is really where it's different. These are pillars, crushable pillars that move. Now, what they're going to show you here, this isn't someone's spine. This is one of those little pillars, and it moves. So here you're seeing, no matter where you impact this helmet, these things move and they absorb the shock. See, in a traditional football helmet, it's hard plastic, and the only thing that moves is your head or your spine. And what they have here is that the same as in the car crash technology is it absorbs the shock. So the movement happens within the helmet. And so what they're going to do now is just show us how this looks. See that? That is so amazing. Now, these are where the most serious head injuries in football happen. Now, here's a traditional. See how that? Boom, look at that shock. None there. Really cool product. This is going to be the future of our sport. And a lot of people are rightfully worried, but you know what? We get technology companies like this working on those problems. We shouldn't have any issue. I should mention to you that Vices is simply an example. I'm trying to show of what we would spend 10 minutes here developing an interest in one product. That's all we want to do, is develop the interest and steer people who are interested to the place where they can get answers to their questions on your product. So when you sponsor our product, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing you as a part of our content, as a part of the educational process that we're doing with young Canadian football players. Okay, so I've mentioned this as a quick summary. Hopefully this has been short enough for you. I certainly will encourage you, though, to give me any suggestions that you think by emailing me from my website, which is, you can contact me by any number of the message buttons, and there's even a contact page by itself there, so you can do that. So really what I want to see is, if we do have these different schemes and different techniques, which I know we do, then we need to get that information out to as many of our players and as many of our coaches as we possibly can across Canada. And we need to exchange views. What I've found is the more you know about football and the higher you go in the levels, it starts to become a matter of opinion. It starts to become really how someone sees it, how your team's constructed, whether you get to draft players or whether you don't. Okay, in a high school team, or some community teams, you come out and that's your roster, and you have to do the best you can with it. That doesn't mean, and that does change how you should be looking at scheme. But the more we know about the scheme and the more that we know about our game, and what we can do with it, the more that we're going to be successful in the Canadian game. And the Canadian game's got a lot to offer. I've been in and out of love with the Canadian game all my life, and I love all kinds of football. So don't get me wrong, there's no negatives I have toward either league. I think in most cases, I view everything as a learning experience. And if I was in that NFL right now, I'd be looking at the CFL. I'd be looking at the CFL for the advances that they're making on read pass options and package plays, and some of the things they're doing there are pretty exciting. But then again, it's a different field, and so perhaps that wouldn't apply. Anyway, I appreciate your time today. I really hope that we were able to communicate what it is that we want to do and how we want to do it. The main name of our game is to engage anybody that comes to a webinar in the content, with the content, and get them involved as much as possible, as much as we can use the interactive platform. After all, internet marketing really comes down to one major difference: the ability to interact with the presenter or interact with content. And that's the vision we have on the marketing side, and we have it on the content side as well. There's a lot that marketing can teach education, and there's a lot education can teach marketing. And we hope that you'll join us in doing something along those lines, providing Canadian content to Canadian coaches, by Canadian coaches, and to Canadian players. Thank you very much for your time. If you need to contact me, you can email me anytime on through my website. Thank you very much.